Hello and welcome back. You're watching the Scattered Guy, the show which is all about the statistics, mathematics and game mechanics of Warhammer, the old world. It's been a little while since my last video. Apologies for the wait, but I have been working on something which I think is quite exciting. It's been quite a complicated video to put together. Quite a lot of quite complex maths involved in digging in and understanding this. Basically, if you watched my last video, you would have seen I did one looking at a situation that came out of one of the official GW FAQs, which looked at what happens when you have an attack which benefits from both the poison attacks and armor bane special rules, and I did some analysis on that, and there's a choice that you get to make there which can impact the probabilities of successfully producing an unsaved wound. And off the back of that, there was a lot of conversation, particularly in the comments, people asking lots of questions about particularly Arcane bodkins and Hagbane tips, which are two of the Wood Elf Enchanted Arrow options, and so there was a bit of discussion there about which of those is best, because Arcane bodkins gives you armor piercing and Hagbane tips give you poison attacks. However, it's a slightly different scenario to the one we analysed in the previous video, and it's actually a much more complex scenario because it's not a choice that you make in the game, it's a choice you make in advance when you're writing your list as to which of those you're going to pick. So I've been looking into that, and in fact I've just taken a look at all the Enchanted Arrow options which are available to the Wood Elf faction. So that is this video. So, Wood Elves are a unique and popular faction with a particular focus on ranged play. With a base ballistic skill of 4 and with many elite units and characters exceeding this with values up to a ballistic skill of 7, which is the joint highest in the game, Wood Elves are formidable archers. You add to this the asrai longbow, which is standard equipment for a large portion of the faction, and the choice of a range of enchanted arrows, and you have yourself an army capable of some incredibly potent long-range threat projection. But with so much choice, there are some decisions to make. So in this article, I'm going to explore the range of enchanted arrows available to Wood Elves and delve into the mathematics behind their relative advantages and disadvantages. So, to begin with, we'll look at the asrai longbow. The asrai longbow is standard equipment for a large portion of Wood Elf units, from the most basic unit of Glade Guard all the way up to Lord level Wood Elf nobles. In comparison to a standard Old World longbow, the asrai bow provides an additional 2 inch of range at 32 inches, and it also makes use of the unit strength characteristic compared to a standard longbow which has a fixed strength of 3. In practice, this strength boost is limited to characters, as the standard Wood Elf strength characteristic is only 3 in any case, and even with characters you'll only get up to strength 4 without buffs. The additional range, therefore, is the primary benefit of the asrai longbow. As with the standard longbow, the asrai longbow also benefits from the volley fire and armor bane 1 special rules. Neither bow offers any base armor piercing. All in all, the asrai longbow therefore offers a minor advantage to the Wood Elves compared to the more standard longbow. It's really the fact that just quite so many Wood Elf units come equipped with this as standard, in conjunction with their range of other special rules, which really stack up to make the Wood Elves so formidable at distance. Wood Elves have at their disposal a range of enchanted arrows. These are used in conjunction with the asrai longbow, and modify the weapon's characteristics for a small additional points cost per model. There are 5 options available. Arcane bodkins, which gives the weapon the armor piercing -2 rule. Hagbane tips, which gives the weapon the poisoned attack special rule. Moonfire shot, which gives the weapon the flaming attacks and magical attack special rules. Swift shiver shards, which gives the weapon the multiple shots 2 special rule. And true flight arrows, which gives the weapon the ignores cover and quick shot special rules. The choice of enchanted arrows, if you take any at all, you don't have to, is an equipment selection decision for each unit when writing your list. You can choose independently for each unit and character, but each can only take one type. If you're writing a list for a known opponent, there may be a fairly obvious choice here. In contrast, if you're writing an all-comers list, just a generic list, or perhaps for a tournament, or for pickup games where you don't necessarily know who your opponent's going to be, then the choice is going to become far more complicated. Any choice will provide relatively greater or lesser benefits in some matchups than others. So the remainder of the video is dedicated to evaluating the relative merits of the different Enchanted Arrow choices in such scenarios. Before we get onto that, let's just take a quick recap on the armor bane rule, as this is a basic characteristic of the asrai longbow. You will always benefit from armor bane with any Wood Elf archers. As mentioned, the asrai longbow, just like the standard longbow, benefits from armor bane 1. This introduces interesting dynamics to the evaluation, as some of the Enchanted Arrow options, such as Arcane bodkins, which gives you armor piercing -2, will work in tandem with this effect, whilst others, such as Hagbane tips, which gives you poisoned attacks, do not. As per my previous video, due to the way poisoned attacks and armor bane work, you cannot simultaneously benefit from the effects of both of these special rules. This does not mean that having both special rules on the same weapon is not still valuable, but if you roll a 6 to hit, you will have to make the choice between taking the automatic wound from poisoned attacks and foregoing armor bane, or risking the wound and trying for armor bane on the to wound roll. Armor bane increases the armor piercing characteristic of the attack when you roll a natural 6 to wound. The relative value of armor bane depends upon a number of factors. Firstly, the target value of the to wound roll. A low target value means that you're more likely to score a wound, but proportionally less likely for that wound to be achieved on a natural 6, which is required to activate the benefits of armor bane. In contrast, if you have a high target value to wound, this will mean you are relatively less likely to score a wound overall, but when you do, there is a proportionally higher chance of activating the benefits of armor bane. If you have to roll a 6 to wound, you're only going to wound on 1 in 6 attempts, but every wound is scored on a natural 6, so you will benefit from armor bane every time. The second factor is your opponent's base armor value and any basic armor piercing characteristic you already benefit from. These together will determine the target for your opponent's armor save roll before the benefits of armor bane are factored in. If your opponent has no armor, or they only have relatively light armor, which is already negated by your basic armor piercing characteristic, then armor bane may provide no additional benefit. Conversely, if your opponent has a very good armor value, or if they have a middling armor value but you have a low or non-existing armor piercing characteristic, then armor bane can make a significant difference to the effectiveness of their armor save. And finally, the value of your armor bane special rule. In most cases, this will only be 1 or 2, however armor bane is a stackable rule, so higher values are possible in some cases, particularly for your characters. The table here, the top table here, demonstrates the probabilities that a successful hit will result in an unsaved wound, depending upon both the target value of the to wound roll, which will depend upon the attack strength and the target's toughness, and the target value of the opponent's armor save, after accounting for any base armor piercing characteristic of the attack. The asrai longbow provides armor bane 1. The second table here demonstrates the same scenario accounting for the benefits of this rule. As can be seen, in any case the opponent has some level of unmitigated armor save before accounting for the effects of armor bane, the armor bane 1 special rule increases the prospects of scoring an unsaved wound. This table demonstrates the relative probability that a successful hit will result in an unsaved wound with armor bane 1 compared to the same situation but without armor bane. We can see that this ranges from no benefit at all, in the situation the opponent had no unmitigated armor save to begin with, through to the most advantageous situation where we only wound on a 6 and the opponent has a 2+ armor save, in which case we can expect on average to double the number of unsaved wounds caused. Though, to be clear, this is still a very low number of unsaved wounds at only 6%. Moving on then to look at our Enchanted Arrow options. The first arrow type is Arcane bodkins. Arcane bodkins provides the bow with an armor piercing value of -2. Armor piercing reduces the effectiveness of your opponent's armor. The benefits of this characteristic will obviously depend upon the equipment carried by the target unit. When you're shooting at an entirely unarmoured opponent, armour piercing is of no value, as they have no armour save to begin with. Conversely, when shooting at a lightly armoured opponent, say with a 5+ or 6+ armour save, armour piercing -2 will completely eliminate the effectiveness of their armour, meaning they no longer benefit from an armour save. When shooting at a more heavily armoured opponent, for instance a 2+ to a 4+ armour save, AP -2 will not eliminate their armour save, but it will substantially improve the odds of scoring an unsaved wound. Arcane bodkins also works well in conjunction with the natural characteristics of the asrai longbow. If you roll a natural 6 to wound, the bow's Armor Bane 1 special rule will further improve the armor piercing characteristic to -3. The first table here demonstrates the probabilities that a successful hit will result in an unsaved wound, accounting for the Armor Bane 1 characteristic of the asrai longbow, but assuming standard arrows, so AP of dash. The second table demonstrates the same scenario, but with arcane bodkins. As you can see, if the opponent has no armour save to begin with, Arcane Bodkins provides no additional benefit. However, in almost any case the opponent has some level of armour save, the armour piercing characteristic of Arcane Bodkins increases the chances of successfully scoring an unsaved wound. The better the opponent's armour save, the greater the benefit conferred by the Enchanted Arrows. This table demonstrates the relative benefits of Arcane Bodkins versus a standard arrow. In the most extreme scenario, for example against an opponent with a base armour save of 2+, Arcane Bodkins doubles your prospects of scoring an unsaved wound or better. Hagbane Tips is the next arrow type. This provides the bow with a poisoned attack special rule. Weapons with poisoned attacks automatically wound if you roll a natural 6 to hit. The benefits of this special rule will depend upon both the to hit and to wound target values. If you have a high to hit target, you are less likely to hit overall, but it is relatively more likely any hits scored will be on a 6, resulting in a higher probability that hits you do score benefit from the special rule and wound automatically. Conversely, if you have a low to hit target, you are more likely to hit overall, but it is relatively less likely any hits scored will be on a 6, so you will benefit from the special rule proportionally less of the time. If you have a high to wound target, the majority of your hits will fail to wound, so automatically wounding becomes quite valuable. However, if you have a low to wound target, the benefits of automatically wounding are relatively less significant. Another relevant factor which needs to be considered is that taking Hagbane Tips means that you are shooting with a weapon which has both the poisoned attacks and Armor Bane 1 special rules. As discussed extensively in my previous video, due to the mechanics of these two rules, whilst a weapon may have both, you cannot benefit from the effects of both rules simultaneously. If you roll a 6 to hit and take the automatic wound from poisoned attacks, you don't roll to wound, so you can't trigger the benefits of Armor Bane on the same attack. Armor Bane improves your AP characteristic on a to wound roll of 6, but you're not rolling to wound. As clarified in the official FAQs, in the scenario you roll a 6 to hit with a Hagbane Tips, you can make a choice. Either take the automatic wound and forego the potential benefits of Armor Bane, or you can forego the automatic wound and roll to wound as normal in the hope of wounding on a 6 and scoring the additional benefits from the asrai longbow's Armor Bane 1 special rule. The good news is that the choice in this case is very straightforward. With an Armor Bane value of 1, there are no scenarios in which forgoing the automatic wound from poisoned attacks improves your overall odds of producing an unsaved wound. You can refer to my previous video for an in-depth analysis of this situation. Armor Bane is a stackable rule, so in theory it may be possible that some combination of buffs or magic items might enhance the bow's basic Armor Bane value, which would change this conclusion in some situations. Though I've not looked at this in any detail. I'd love to hear from you if you were aware of any way of using Enchanted Arrows with a higher Armor Bane value, but for this article we will continue to focus on the standard scenario, which is the standard asrai longbow with Armor Bane 1. On the above basis, while there are clear benefits to the poisoned attack special rule, i.e. automatically wounding, which is always a plus, you do need to account for the fact that you will be forgoing the benefits of Armor Bane in some cases when making attacks with Hagbane Tips. The tables here demonstrate the relative probability of an attack resulting in an unsaved wound for different to hit target rolls for Hagbane Tips versus a standard arrow. So you can see in the top left, we have the situation where it's a 6+ to hit, and then 5+ below, 4+ below that, and then on the right hand side 3+ and 2+. And what we're seeing here is the relative probability of producing an unsaved wound versus a standard arrow. As expected, Hagbane Tips confers greater benefits the higher the to-hit target is, as a greater proportion of hits are likely to occur on a roll of 6. However, even with a lower to-hit target, Hagbane Tips can confer significant benefits. For example, if you look at the table in the bottom right corner, this shows that even on a 2+ to hit, in some cases Hagbane Tips can more than double the probability of scoring an unsaved wound. So, for example, for a 6+ to wound with no armour save. Note that the largest benefits tend towards the lower right hand side of the table, for example against opponents with low armour saves and or a high to wound target, which correlates to higher toughness values. It's interesting to compare this to Arcane bodkins, where the benefits are strongest towards the upper left hand side of the table, i.e. against opponents with high armour saves and or low toughness values. We can see this on the tables here, which demonstrate this relationship, presenting the relative probabilities of an unsaved wound from each arrow type in each scenario. The positive percentage, highlighted green, indicates that Hagbane Tips is more likely to result in an unsaved wound, whilst a negative percentage, highlighted red, indicates that Arcane bodkins is more likely to result in an unsaved wound. As we can see, Arcane bodkins and Hagbane Tips have alternative and complementary effects, with each being strongest where the other is weakest. Of course, no single unit can take both arrow types. Which of the two is more powerful will depend upon the opponents you are facing and how they are equipped. When facing armoured opponents, Arcane bodkins has the edge more often than not, increasingly so the more heavily armoured they are. However, against opponents with high toughness, particularly if they are not also heavily armoured, Hagbane Tips can be stronger. Any to hit modifiers you are facing can also have an impact. Lower to hit targets shift the table more favourably towards Arcane bodkins, so this may be the better choice for your characters and elite units with higher ballistic skill characteristics. Higher to hit targets shift the table more favourably towards Hagbane Tips, suggesting this might be more beneficial for your run-of-the-mill troops, particularly if you're shooting in instances where there are negative to hit modifiers. There is, however, one significant exception to this. We've only looked here at scenarios up to a 6+ to hit. However, there are scenarios in which models require a 7+ or higher to hit. The rules for shooting explain how this works, but essentially you first have to roll a 6, and then you re-roll, and there's another target roll you have to hit, which depends upon the overall target. The explanatory text to the poison's attack special rule explicitly states that the rule cannot be used in scenarios with a 7+ to hit. This has an interesting impact in that Hagbane Tips becomes relatively more potent the higher the to hit target until it reaches 7+ to hit or higher, after which Hagbane Tips becomes worthless as the model can no longer make use of the poison's attack special rule. In practice, with elves having a base ballistic skill characteristic of 4, equating to a 3+ to hit before modifiers, it will be relatively rare that Wood Elf units will be faced with this scenario. However, it's not beyond the realms of possibility, as negative to hit modifiers are stackable and can quickly add up. Players opting for Hagbane Tips will need to keep this in mind and plan strategically to minimise shooting in situations which trigger this additional penalty. Moonfire Shot gives the weapon the magical attacks and flaming attacks special rules. Of all the Enchanted Arrow options available to Wood Elf units, this is probably the most niche and specialised, being useful only against certain quite specific opponents. The magical attack special rule means that attacks count as magical, but otherwise it has no general impact. The principal benefit of magical attacks is that they can wound units with the ethereal special rule. Such units are impervious to ordinary attacks, so whilst they are not particularly common, when encountered they can be particularly tricky to deal with unless you have suitably equipped troops. Units with the ethereal special rule can be found in a small number of factions, but the only faction with more than one such unit is the Vampire Counts. Whilst none of the Vampire Counts' core unit choices benefit from this rule, it's possible for a Vampire Counts player to construct a list of a large number of characters, rare and special unit choices which are all invulnerable to ordinary attacks. Moonfire Shot provides the Wood Elf player with an answer to lists like this. Against such an opponent, there is clear value to being able to field a large number of missile troops with the magical attack special rule. Against more mundane opponents, the magical attack special rule confers no tangible benefits, so this is something of an all or nothing rule. It's incredibly potent against the right opponents, but completely useless against most others. The other special rule conveyed by Moonfire shot is similar. The primary benefit of having flaming attacks is that units with the flammable special rule are prohibited from making a regeneration save against these attacks. As with magical attacks, this special rule is only useful against a certain subset of opponents, in this case, those with both the regeneration and flammable special rules. However, it's fair to say that this subset covers a decidedly larger selection of units, including a large number of undead unit types, both vampire counts and tomb kings, also trolls, tree men if you happen to be fighting some kind of inter-Wood Elf civil war, and also a range of chaos units. The benefit of flaming attacks will depend upon the value of your target's regeneration X special rule. In most cases, the value is 6, meaning that the unit can regenerate lost runes on a roll of a 6. The flaming attack special rule will increase effective damage output against such units by 20%. In less common cases, the value of X is 5, meaning that the unit can regenerate lost wounds on a roll of 5+. The flaming attack special rule will increase effective damage output against these units by 50%. I'm not aware of any units with regeneration 4+ or better, but if any such exist, then further benefits would be accrued. If we compare these values to the range of benefits accrued from other Enchanted Arrow types, they're not particularly great. In many circumstances, Arcane bodkins or Hagbane tips will provide similar or greater prospects of successfully achieving an unsaved and unregenerated wound, whilst also conveying benefits against a far wider range of opposing unit types. There is one further benefit to flaming attacks, which is that units with this special rule cause fear in models whose troop type is war beasts or swarms. This is a valuable effect in limited circumstances, but again, it's only effective in quite niche scenarios. Overall, therefore, Moonfire shot will be valuable against certain opponents, but in most other instances, there are better options for Enchanted Arrows. If you're writing a list specifically to face off against the vampire counts, then this may well be worth considering, but for an all-comers list, this is rarely going to be of any significant value. Swift Shiver Shards conveys the weapon with the multiple shot 2 special rule. Multiple shots gives the player the option to have each model in the unit shoot twice each turn, doubling the ranged output. However, when firing with multiple shots, the unit suffers from an additional -1 to hit modifier. Unlike previous arrow options, which we were able to compare in terms of the relative probability of producing an unsaved wound per attack, with Swift Shiver Shards the analysis becomes slightly more complex. For each individual attack, the multiple attack special rule actually reduces the probability of producing an unsaved wound due to the negative to hit modifier. However, with each model shooting twice, there are double the quantity of chances, so the overall damage output of the unit is increased in most circumstances. The first table here demonstrates the basic probabilities of hitting with a shooting attack based upon the unit's ballistic skill characteristic and any to hit modifiers applied. Modifiers are applied for a range of situations, including firing at long range, moving and shooting, and firing at a target behind cover. They are stackable, but in most circumstances, -4 is the most severe modifier you're likely to encounter. The multiple shot special rule applies an additional -1 to hit modifier, so whatever the probabilities of hitting are without multiple shots, the chances of hitting move down one cell in the table. The next table at the bottom of the screen demonstrates this, showing the revised probabilities after accounting for the modifier due to the multiple shot special rule. As you can see, in all cases, the probabilities are slightly reduced. The impact of each model firing multiple times is not entirely straightforward. As I covered in my Introduction to Warhammer series, when making a single attack there is a binary outcome, hit or miss, wound or don't wound. However, when a model makes 2 attacks, there are multiple outcomes. We could hit with both attacks, miss with both attacks, or we could hit with just one of the 2 attacks. To fully analyse the situation, we would need to consider the probability distribution. However, for a basic analysis, which is sufficient for our purposes of evaluating the various Enchanted Arrow types, we can simply just consider the average damage output of using the multiple shots 2 special rule relative to standard arrows. With each model attacking twice, the effect is of course going to be a doubling of the total damage output, i.e. wounds caused, on average, after we account for the -1 to hit modifier. As can be seen here, the effects are actually surprisingly complex. In a significant number of cases, the negative to hit modifier and the additional attacks cancel out, so that there is on average no net impact either way. That's the cells with the 100% relative damage output shaded in blue. It's pertinent to note that for ballistic skill 4, which is the basic ballistic characteristic value of many core Wood Elf troop types, this occurs with a to hit modifier before accounting for the -1 to hits from multiple shots of -2 or -3. We're likely to encounter modifiers in this range quite regularly during play, so it's worth bearing in mind that in such scenarios, Swiss Shiver shards conveys no overall benefit. In a small number of cases, so for low ballistic skill units already shooting with significant to hit modifiers, using multiple shots actually means that a hit is no longer possible, requiring a 10+ to hit. So the rule has a negative impact. The good news here is that Wood Elf archers invariably have BS values high enough to avoid these impacts. It's also worth bearing in mind that with the multiple shot special rule, you don't have to take the multiple shots. You can always choose just to fire a single shot and not take the modifier. Finally, there are cases, particularly for units with a higher ballistic skill characteristic, where the impact is predominantly positive, increasing damage output by 33 to 75% depending on the specific scenario. We can see that in the green highlighted cells, particularly towards the right hand side of the table. Whilst these are not the highest figures we've seen for different arrow types by any measure, they will apply more consistently than the benefits of the other arrow types, as they are not dependent on factors such as the target's toughness characteristic or what armour they're wearing. This could make Swift Shiver shards a safer bet, particularly for high ballistic skill units such as characters with a ballistic skill of 6 or 7. For such units, whilst Hagbane tips or Arcane bodkins may result in better overall probabilities of scoring an unsaved wound in certain specific scenarios, the more moderate benefits of Swift Shiver shards apply in a broader range of circumstances and result in a stronger all-round performance. Really, this is about weighing up the risk. Do we want to go for big benefits some of the time, or do we want to go for more moderate benefits more of the time? The final Enchanted Arrow option is True Flight Arrows. This grants the weapon the Ignores Cover and Quick Shot special rules. Ignores Cover allows the unit to ignore any to hit modifiers that would normally apply due to shooting at a target behind cover. Ordinarily there is a -1 modifier for targets in partial cover and -2 for targets in full cover. In a similar vein, Quick Shot allows the unit to ignore the -1 to hit modifier that would normally apply due to moving and shooting. It also allows the unit to make a stand and shoot charge reaction even when the charge distance is less than the charging unit's movement characteristic. The removal of the minimum range for a stand and shoot reaction will only provide quite context-specific benefits. Much of the time enemy units will charge from a greater range, so the unit will only be able to make the stand and shoot charge. So the unit would be able to make the stand and shoot charge reaction in any case. It is also worth noting that Wood Elves generally thrive when focusing on ranged play and are notoriously weak when engaged in close combat. For this reason, Wood Elf strategy often revolves around keeping the enemy at distance, avoiding close combat, for which being charged is a precursor, as much as possible. On the other hand, where opposing units have close and are able to make the charge, getting a final volley of arrows off before play shifts to close combat could be highly valuable. The benefits of ignoring the to hit modifiers for cover and moving and shooting will be more generically useful, particularly considering the Wood Elf playstyle. Being able to move around nimbly whilst keeping terrain features between your units and the opponents, all without penalties when shooting, allows the Wood Elf general to play to the faction's strengths and constantly frustrate the enemy. The basic to hit probabilities based on the BS characteristics and the to hit modifiers were outlined in one of the previous slides. The tables here demonstrate the same situation when True Flight Arrows allow the unit to ignore a -1, -2 or -3 to hit modifier respectively. Note that there may still be other to hit modifiers which are not ignored, for example -1 for shooting at long range. The slides here now show the relative probability of scoring a hit with true flight arrows versus a standard arrow in each scenario. As is reasonably self-evident, where the unit would not have suffered from to hit modifiers for either moving and shooting or firing at a target behind cover in the first instance, there is no relative benefit to true flight arrows. Conversely, the more significant the modifiers the unit would otherwise be facing, the more substantial the benefits of ignoring these modifiers. Where true flight arrows allows the unit to ignore -2 or -3 worth of modifiers, the relative probability of hitting the opponent increases quite substantially. The hit modifiers have a relatively greater impact the lower the BS characteristic of the unit. As such, being able to ignore them affords lower BS units a relatively greater benefit, whilst the benefits of higher BS units are more moderate. This is particularly the case for units with a ballistic skill of 6 or better. Such units get a reroll of any failed rolls to hit. Any modifiers are only applied to the initial roll to hit, not the reroll, so the benefits of ignoring the modifiers likewise only apply to the initial roll. This infers that true flight arrows are better suited for basic units with ballistic skill 4, such as Glade Guard or Deepwood Scouts, than they are for characters or more elite archers. At a ballistic skill of 6 or above, you're probably better off taking Swift Shiver shards in most, but not necessarily all instances. Hopefully that was useful and interesting for you. As we've seen, all of the Enchanted Arrows available to Wood Elf players provide benefits in different situations. Some are better suited to different archer types, for instance standard ballistic skill 4 units versus ballistic skill 6 or 7 characters, whilst others will serve better depending on the target unit, for instance how heavily armoured or tough the specific target unit is, or whether the target unit benefits from certain special rules. All in all, I think the analysis demonstrates quite a balanced selection. No single option is universally better or worse than all the others. Whichever option you take, there will always be situations in your game where it will prove to be the best choice, and others where you might have been better off with another option. If you're writing a list to face off against a specific opponent, then there may be an obvious choice. For an all-comers list, you have quite a few choices which can serve well in different scenarios, and the most effective approach may well be to take a range of different Enchanted Arrows with different units. Maintaining an awareness of which units are going to be stronger in which situations, based upon the analysis presented, will allow you then to adapt and optimise your playstyle to achieve the best matchups. I hope you found that interesting. Thank you for watching. If you found that interesting, or if you've got any questions, please do get in touch in the comments. Do like and subscribe the channel, and finally, as always, there will be exclusive show notes available to Patreon subscribers. You can find the link on my profile. Thank you very much.